Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and in today's video, I'll be running through my early transfer plans ahead of Game Week 24. Welcome back everyone to another video. Now, if you did enjoy today's video, leave a like, hit subscribe if you're new around here, all that good stuff. But let's talk about the big news from the weekend first up as we run through how my team has done in Game Week 23. About 10 minutes before the deadline, we got a leak, and a fairly reliable leak from a source that we've all seen in the community before, if you're online, if you're on X, Twitter, as it was formerly known, called Lazy FPL. Now, they posted that Haaland and Foden were not starting. I was planning on rolling, and I honestly was in the gym at the time, not really focusing on FPL. I got a few different messages, luckily from a few people out in the community saying, Sam, you probably should see this. And so I had about 10 minutes to react to it, as everyone did. If you even saw the news, I know a lot of you probably wouldn't have, because not all of us can get to our phones that quickly, especially if you're in different time zones. I was fortunate enough to be able to react to the news. I have no idea whether the decisions I made were good or not. But in the end, what I decided to do was follow through on my plan of getting rid of Foden if I was to hear that he was benched. The player that I wanted to bring in was Bruno Fernandes. I didn't have the money to do that with one free transfer. So I had to find another player to downgrade to make up those funds. In the 3-4 minutes between deciding I wanted to get Bruno and figuring out who I was going to buy before the deadline to be able to afford it, I picked out 3 players that I might be able to downgrade. One was Saka, but I was pretty adamant that if I wasn't going to captain Erling Haaland, I would have captained Saka, so I wasn't going to sell him this week. I thought he was going to start. Szoboszlai was the second one. Now, I am very fortunate that I decided not to sell him, although I would have sold him to Harry Wilson, so wouldn't have been that far down on the deal, but 13 points from Szoboszlai, so I'm very grateful, very lucky that I didn't get rid of him. I did, however, decide in the end to get rid of Hugo Ekitike. I had no information that he wasn't going to start. I think the early rumours were that he was, in fact, going to start. I just decided of all of the downgrades I was willing to make, it was the one that I felt would least punish me over the next 5-6 game weeks. I wanted Thiago in the end, maybe not over the next 2 or 3 game weeks specifically, but in 3 or 4 game weeks time anyway. And he was such a downgrade in terms of funds, but not such a downgrade in terms of player quality. So I went with Thiago. He obviously blanked. I benched Haaland, which as soon as the deadline went, I really, really regretted that move. And I feel like even though he was benched, there was a decent chance of him coming off the bench and scoring. And the effective ownership against me was like 180%. So I was petrified when he came off the bench against Wolves. I got away with that, got lucky. Obviously brought in Bruno Fernandes, who did get the assist, but my 2 transfers in didn't really do much. And the player that I brought into my starting 11 in place of Erling Haaland was Alderete, who also scored a 1-pointer. So it wouldn't have really made a difference whether I started him or not. I've brought forward a couple of moves that I was planning on making this week into Game Week 24. And obviously it means that I've only got 1 free transfer to maneuver in Game Week 24 itself. But I do have Bruno Fernandes. Luckily, I held on to Szoboszlai. Great free kick, by the way. Obviously got the assist from the corner too. The rest of my midfield, barring my captain Saka, all returned. So Rodgers actually hit DEFCON as well, which might be the first time this season he's done that. Obviously picked up the assist. And Anderson ticking along nicely with 5 points yet again. Anderson in my backline, the Fulham Anderson, also picked up an assist, got DEFCON, got a bonus point, I think, to take him up to 8 points. Other than that, it was blanks all round for Kelleher, Gabriel, Timber, Alderete. Honestly, I was going into that final game on the Sunday between Arsenal and Man United feeling really, really optimistic. I was in a good place. Most of my players had returned already, and I had 4 yet to come, including my captain in that game. And it was a bit of a disappointment. So it's going to be a green arrow. Obviously, we've got Everton versus Leeds on the Monday night. I'm recording this Monday morning. So my green arrow will take a bit of a hit, but the effective ownerships aren't massive in that game. So I should end up at about 300k, I think, which is still a good game week, 49 points all out. But I just have the feeling it could have been so much better. It could have been so much more. And obviously the Saka blank really hurt. That could have been a massive opportunity that was missed. If Arsenal were to keep a clean sheet, that would have also been helpful. Or if Bruno went and got a few more points, also helpful. So yeah, the Arsenal game was a disappointment. Otherwise, I'm pretty happy with the game week. And I don't feel like I reacted too poorly to the Foden Haaland news, but there is an element of I got away with it. So yeah, look, 49 points, not complaining whatsoever. I think it was just worth talking through my decision making because it wasn't something I was specifically eyeing up in my transfer plans video last week, but reacting to the news, as we all did, if we were even awake at the time, is something that we all had to do very, very quickly. So that's how I ended up. I've got Thiago, I've got Bruno Fernandes, and Haaland will come back off my bench in Game Week 24, I'm sure. Okay, so taking a first look at how I'm set up ahead of Game Week 24 before any free transfers are used, I think I'm relatively happy with it. My goalkeeper isn't ideal. Kelleher away at Aston Villa or Dubravka away at Sunderland. Arguably, you could play him instead, but that might be a bit of a weak point for the next couple of game weeks because Brentford's fixtures, for the next couple at least, aren't that great. They do turn again. I think it's game week 27. So just have to maybe grit my teeth for the next couple of game weeks. Into my back line, very happy with the starting three right now. Gabriel, Timber away at Leeds. Not an easy fixture by any means, but it's still a good defence. And then Alderete at home to Burnley is a good player to be owning this week. Obviously, Sunderland have taken a bit of a knock recently. They haven't been quite so good defensively. Their data has taken a bit of a downturn, and Granit Xhaka was out in game week 23. Hopefully he's back, and I think that would help them out. And obviously they've got players returning from AFCON, reintegrating with the side and getting their minutes back up as well. So I think that Sunderland have a good chance of a clean sheet in this fixture, but it hasn't gone unnoticed that maybe they're not quite as solid as they were earlier on in the season. But I still think he's an easy enough start. Into my midfield five, starting off with Bukayo Saka, I think I'm going to hold him again. And the reason being, I think he will probably get the rest in the Champions League. Arsenal are through and probably through, in fact, almost certainly through in first place, definitely in the top 8 for the Champions League into the knockout rounds. So they can heavily rotate in the Champions League. That means, to me anyway, that Saka is very likely to start and get good minutes against Leeds. So I think he stays for another game week. Rodgers, again, very happy with him. Comes into good fixtures now between now and game week 36, to be honest. So he's going nowhere. Fernandes is a player that I specifically wanted to buy for game week 24 because Man United come into some decent fixtures and Fernandes is just inevitable at the moment. So I'm very happy to own him. And then Anderson is the other player that is just ticking along nicely. And I've said it consistently ever since I started owning him. He will just keep getting 4 or 5 pointers most weeks. And for the price, that's pretty good. And the last 3 game weeks, I think, has been 7, 5, 5. He has proven that he can also get the odd assist, the odd goal as well. He's not a bad player to own, but it's not exciting. So there is one transfer combination where I'm looking at maybe upgrading him because I do have 1.1 million in the bank to do so now. So it's not out of the realms of possibility that I do look at maybe upgrading him slightly, but I don't think he's a problem in my team. Szoboszlai is the final one I want to discuss. We've got some transfer plans regarding him later on in the video. Obviously did very well in game week 23. Up until that point had been frustrating, missed a penalty. And now Salah's back in as well, so he will be off of penalties, but he'll definitely continue to take direct free kicks given his recent form there, and he's on set pieces from corners as well. So Newcastle don't travel well. I think that's worth noting. At home to Newcastle, Liverpool might have a good go of it. They've not been in the best form themselves, of course, and Szoboszlai isn't the most expensive pick. I just wonder if at that price point, there are better options out there now, especially given that you're now removing penalties from the equation for Szoboszlai. Yeah, I don't think he's a must sell, but given the rest of my side, he might be a weak point. Now, moving into my forward line, I've got Haaland. The captaincy armband is currently on him, but I think when we get to my team selection later on in the game week, I will have a very close call between him and Fernandes. I'm actually pretty tempted to switch it to Fernandes, but Tottenham have not been in the best form as of late. Man City will probably have their tails up in the Premier League, given that they're only 4 points off top now. Haaland has been in some pretty shoddy form. I think the worst form he's ever been in a Man City shirt. So it could go either way for me, but he's definitely not a sell for me just yet. Spurs away is absolutely fine. And until we see a player like Salah or Palmer standing up and banging in goals for fun, Haaland is just not going to be worth selling, in my personal opinion, even if the iffy form continues. Thiago comes into some not great fixtures, as I discussed with Kelleher, but he is consistent. He will get 90 minutes. He is on penalties. And it's not all that long before the fixtures turn yet again. I think he's just the second best striker to own. There are a couple of other strikers that are putting their hands up at the moment. Jarrod Bowen might be on penalties now for West Ham if Paqueta does indeed go off to Brazil. And then you've got João Pedro that some people are considering. I'm not quite there yet on João Pedro, I must admit. I don't think the minutes are going to be as consistent as we need them to be. He's been a very frustrating own at times this season. And there are other players that will come back into the fold with at Chelsea that weren't involved this game week. So although he's tempting, I think I'd prefer the penalty-taking striker who definitely gets 90 minutes and much better data as well, it must be said, in Thiago. So, few weak points. I haven't even discussed my bench, but Lewis Hall's there away at Liverpool. You've got Anderson away at Man United. I've got a few different options where I might want to use my free transfer, so let's run through them now. Okay, so option number one that I maybe instinctively first considered was moving out Szoboszlai to another mid-price midfielder, and there are actually quite a few on my radar now. I've narrowed it down to just 3 for the purposes of this video, but there are a few others that you could select from at around this price point that would be tempting. Now, Szoboszlai, is he a transfer out? I don't think he's a must-sell by any means, but losing penalties does not help his case. The minutes are good, the set pieces are obviously fantastic, and he's not playing in a really withdrawn role. He's not playing in a defensive midfielder role. However, he is known to move to right back if there are injuries. And if Frimpong isn't playing or Bradley isn't playing, Szoboszlai can tuck in there and play in that role. And we saw that for a little bit against Bournemouth as well. So if he's playing in that role at any point, that makes him slightly worse, although technically slightly better on DEFCON. And I do just wonder, given the fixtures coming, the data's not great either as well, 0.32 XGI per 90. With the fixtures of Newcastle at home, Man City at home, followed by Sunderland away, that's not an easy game at the Stadium of Light, and then Nottingham Forest away, it's probably the best of the bunch there, but it's in 4 game weeks' time. And in that time, I could look at any of those other 3 options that are on the right-hand side of the screen, and I think they've got better fixtures. All of them have better data. I'm quite interested in making this move. So Szoboszlai, very happy with what he did in Game Week 23. But he is on my radar as a player that I'm willing to get rid of. I don't want to just hold on to him because he just scored points. I think there are other midfielders that I like the look of. Enzo Fernandez is the one that most obviously appeals because the next 4 fixtures are fantastic and the data is also brilliant. 0.59 XGI per 90 is fantastic. That is bolstered a little bit by the penalties. And obviously, if Cole Palmer's on the pitch, Enzo won't be on penalties. But we've seen it in Game Week 23. We've seen it fairly often recently. I don't think we can guarantee that Palmer is on the pitch all that often. I think he was more of a precautionary absence in Game Week 23, but that might happen again. There's a tight turnaround between quite a few of these games. They've got the Carabao Cup semi-final that they're going to go full strength for, you would think, and they've got the Champions League in the midweek as we build up to West Ham, and that's against Napoli, away from home. They need to win that to be in the top 8, or at least have a chance of the top 8 in the Champions League to avoid the playoffs, and it's pretty unlikely that they do avoid the playoffs, even if they do win that game. So they're going to have a lot of matches. Cole Palmer will be used in the most important of those matches or the most difficult of those matches. If he's even able to be used in those games, he might not be fit enough. So I think with that in mind, Enzo, when he's on the pitch, has a decent share of penalties. But then the question is, how often is Enzo going to be on the pitch? I think much more than Cole Palmer. And at 6.7 million, I think it is now. I think he had the price rise last night. I think it's still very good value for money. He's playing in that 10 role as well, especially when Cole Palmer's not there. He's going to be playing more advanced. So I think he ticks a lot of boxes. My worry would be that even Enzo might get the odd rest in the Premier League over the next 4 fixtures, given the importance of the other matches that they need to play. So it's a great fixture run. I think at time of recording, I'm still tempted to make this move anyway, even with the risk that he might miss one or maybe get reduced minutes in one of the matches at some point. But the fixtures are good enough. 3 home games in there. West Ham, Leeds and Burnley all at home, and Wolves is the away game. It is really good. And then afterwards, you can look at hopping off, maybe across to Harry Wilson by game week 28. The other 2 options I'm considering, Ndai, good enough data, 0.39. Obviously, he's on penalties. He's pretty talismanic at Everton. And the fixtures aren't bad either. He's also at a slightly cheaper price than Enzo. So he's got better penalty share, probably the same, if not better minutes. And they don't have to deal with things like Europe either. So Everton will be well rested. The only thing that puts me off is Everton are just not as good at attack as Chelsea are. So although his goal share might be decent and his penalty share is obviously very high, that's in a team that probably won't score as many goals as Chelsea will. So I like Ndai a lot, and he's also not bad on DEFCON as well, it's worth noting, but the fixtures aren't quite as good, and the data's not quite as good either. So he's in my thinking, but maybe he would be a player I would consider more if I had more reluctance over Enzo and more of a doubt over his minutes over the next few game weeks. The final one is Harry Wilson. I mean, what can you say? He just continues to punish me week after week. 40% effective ownership now. He's just in the form of his life. And the data's never been bad in the Premier League. It's just that the minutes weren't there. But now the minutes are there. It does just make it almost too obvious to go with him. And maybe I'm just missing a trick here by not just immediately bringing him in. The next 4 fixtures are okay. They're not great, but certainly not as good as Chelsea's. He's not on penalties as far as we know, but he's got a great free kick on him. His open play threat's not bad either. And he's got that talismanic energy, a little bit like Rodgers at the moment as well, where they are overperforming. You do expect that to reduce a little bit or regress to the mean. But a player like him, I wouldn't be surprised if it continued. And the fixtures all the way through to when I plan on wildcarding are pretty good as a set. They do get better after game week 27 though. So maybe there's an argument Enzo first, then Harry Wilson after that. But Wilson's ownership is really punishing. And I can see a universe where he scores in any one of those next 4 game weeks. So maybe it's a fear-based pick, but he's definitely in my thinking as well. Now, the other thing I just quickly wanted to note on Harry Wilson specifically is I do actually have the money, 1.1 million in the bank, to upgrade Elliot Anderson to Harry Wilson if I wanted to. Maybe that's something that makes a bit more sense if I was willing to hold on to Szoboszlai for 1 more game week at least. Elliot Anderson obviously will continue to tick along very nicely, 4 or 5 points a week, the odd assist thrown in there as well. So he's never a bad player to hold on to. And I actually do quite like just owning him, having him as a first sub or that 7th attacker some weeks when other people have poor fixtures. And there is obviously the benefit of Elliot Anderson. It doesn't really matter what fixture he's got. Even against Arsenal, you're still expecting 4, maybe 5 points if you get lucky, which is absolutely fine. So he's very playable in any of the matches. Whereas with Wilson, maybe it is a bit more fixture dependent and I would have to worry a bit more about my rotation combinations with him. But up until the point I wildcard, I don't think I'm really going to bench him all that often. Maybe the Man City game away from home, but I can see him scoring in that. I don't think it would be crazy for him to score in that game. The data's decent. Maybe there's an argument to just make this move and keep it simple, keep Szoboszlai for now, and then move him on next game week instead. And bring in Harry Wilson for Anderson and chase the upside on a player that can get those 10 pointers. The thing is, whilst he will get the 10 pointers, he can also more likely get the 2 pointers and the 1 pointers, whereas Elliot Anderson is more likely to just tick along nicely with a base of 4 or 5. So it's, do I want the steady Eddie or do I want to chase the upside with Harry Wilson over the next few weeks? And then a final move that I'm considering with my 1 free transfer, obviously I can't make them all without a hit, but one other move that I am really strongly considering is moving on Lewis Hall, who's been fantastic for me, by the way, but has now entered a period of some pretty poor fixtures. Brentford's fine, but outside of that, it's Liverpool, Tottenham, and Man City all away from home. Newcastle are another team, a bit like Chelsea, who have a lot of commitments in terms of Champions League matches midweek, and they've also got the Carabao Cup semi-final to deal with too. So Lewis Hall has been brilliant, but I think the time might be right to move him on if I was looking at a defensive upgrade. Now, Chalobah would be the obvious upgrade I would make here. I can easily afford it. Chalobah's attacking data is not as good as Lewis Hall's, but the fixtures are so good. Like I mentioned with Enzo, I would like a piece of the Chelsea pie for these next 4 fixtures. It's all about picking the player that I think is going to get the minutes. And Chalobah, although he might not appear to be a high upside player to be buying, he's been ticking along so nicely. Every week he seems to have a different route to points, whether it's DEFCON, whether it's a goal, whether it's an assist, whether it's bonus points attached to a clean sheet. If you look at the overall top scorers in FPL this season, he's right up there. And I can't remember a single game week where he's really stood out as a player that has punished me massively. He's just consistently ticked along with 5 to 6 points on average, week by week. I think maybe he's the pick. And although making this transfer, unless I wanted to take a -4, of course, although making this transfer isn't maybe as appealing in terms of upside as maybe moving Szoboszlai onto Enzo might be. It doesn't seem as, I guess, sexy as a transfer. That's a weird thing to call a transfer, but I'm going to go with it. Chalobah will score points. And if he's starting, and I get the feeling he's going to start at least 3 of those 4 games, probably all 4 of them, I think he gets, what are we thinking, maybe 20, 25 points from those 4 games? That's really, really solid. And it is undoubtedly an upgrade on Lewis Hall, who's coming into some poor fixtures. Maybe this is the way. Maybe this is a boring transfer to make, but it really solidifies me and gives me a really strong third defender to be playing every single week up to game week 28, where again, maybe I want to move him on at that point. I don't know. I suppose the question I've got is, if I go with Chalobah, in 2 game weeks' time when we get to game week 26, am I still going to want a Crystal Palace defender when they go up against Burnley and Wolves at home? Now, normally I'd say I'm not all that fussed considering the form that Palace are in, but Daniel Munoz, at around the same sort of price as Chalobah, in those 2 home fixtures, could be really interesting as a differential. I think outside of that, Richards, Lacroix, I don't hate it, but I'm going off of it slightly. Whereas Daniel Munoz, there's the upside of the attacking returns. Even if they don't keep clean sheets, he could still be a really good pick. So I wonder if I bring in Chalobah. I've already got Timber. I've got Gabriel. I'm realistically not going to be able to get to Munoz unless I sell one of those 3, because if I upgrade Anderson or Alderete, that's a huge upgrade to make, and it gives me a very expensive backline. So if I buy Chalobah now, it's almost committing to no Munoz in game week 26, and I'm not sure I want to commit to that. So that's something that's playing on my mind a little bit. And obviously there are midfielders, Enzo in particular, who I'd also really quite like this week as well. So yeah, let me know which you'd prefer. But my instinct is maybe forgoing the defensive transfer in the search of making a future upgrade defensively that could also pay off in the next couple of game weeks. Not right now, though. Okay, so let's wrap up the video by taking a look at what I think I'm likely to do into game week 24, which is probably to replace Szoboszlai, who I'm very grateful for game week 23, but I think moving forwards, there are better picks out there in midfield that I want to target. Enzo is the most likely candidate that I would probably naturally be bringing in that position. Still gives me 1 million in the bank for future moves down the line. And I think that midfield 5 looks pretty strong all of a sudden, with Bruno in there, Enzo, Rodgers and Saka might be the weak point, but given I think he will rest in the midweek, I think he's going to play against Leeds. And although there aren't many strong arguments to say that he's good value for money now, I accept that. But if I still think he starts, I don't think he's a bad player to be owning for a game away at Leeds. Obviously, I'm playing it week to week with Saka. And if it comes to a time where I think he's going to be benched, rotated, reduced minutes, or if Arsenal don't get the double game week in game week 26, he becomes a much easier player to get rid of. Probably Semenyo, Mbeumo, Rice, all options that I'd be looking at there. But I think this week it's probably fine. So overall, if I made this move, I think this team actually looks really strong going into game week 24. Arguably, the weak point is my double Brentford away at Aston Villa. Obviously, Rodgers going up against Kelleher isn't ideal. I could maybe look at starting Dubravka. That could actually be quite a good play, to be fair. And then Anderson and Lewis Hall on my bench with away games. Anderson away at Man United wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to come off my bench if there was some random rotation. But I think I'm relatively well set up for this game week. I will obviously wait to see what happens in the Champions League in the midweek before making any moves, because I've got a lot of players, including my potential transfer in Enzo, who will be playing in the midweek, you would think. So I need to make sure that they all get through unscathed. I need to make sure that Saka does indeed get a rest, see what happens with Timber, Gabriel, Haaland as well, possibly need to have a look at that, and just make sure that I'm not making a move that might leave me prone to other problems elsewhere in my team. So easy to say that this will be my move before we hit those midweek fixtures, but let's see how it looks after the Champions League is out of the way. But hopefully this is what I get to do going into game week 24. Let me know what your transfer dilemmas are going into game week 24 as well. I'll try and help you out before we get to the deadline. Leave a like if you've enjoyed the video, hit subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll see you next time as we run through my transfer tips ahead of game week 24.